Hi, welcome back. Let's paint a fun, moody landscape today. I've got things sped up so you can always pause and go back if you need to, but hopefully it gives you the gist and general idea as I talk you through it. I've got a blue-brownish mixture in the sky today because I'm going kind of moody, and this is wet on wet. I have tried to leave a little bit of a gap between my sky and water so that these colors do not bleed together, because while it's still wet, I'm going to go ahead and add some moody trees that are going to blur and fade into that sky. So I'm just dripping in a few different paint colors. This first color is a blue-green mixture, a bit more teal, and then I'm dripping in some more red browns and yellow browns, thinking of those beautiful fall colors I see off in those clumps of trees, maybe some more yellow greens, and just letting watercolor do its thing as they bleed together. If it's too dark or bright, I can always dry my brush and wipe it off just like I did there. Now I got distracted by my dog and it dried, and while it dried, there was a bit of a bloom. So I'm going to get the water wet again, and then I'm going to add a few horizontal strokes in the water with the same colors to show that it's connected and a reflected area of the sky, but I'm not as worried about being precise. Now I'm going to actually dry it on purpose this time with the sky and the water. Now that I'm switching to wet on dry, I'm going to be making some harder lines. So here I'm going to add the land, overlapping a bit of the sky and the water. I'm using a muted green, so I'm mixing my green with bits of brown, and then I'm adding just a few little strokes below the ground on to the water to show that reflection. So just suggesting a reflection with a few little wiggles while I have that color already on my paintbrush. This is again all wet on dry, so that I should see those hard edges even on the lines on the water, because these are kind of like the ripples on the water. Now I'm going to go ahead and make some of my tree trunks. I've got a nice dark brown. Since I'm feeling moody, I want this to be a little bit darker or broody, so I've got those wiggly lines. Now I'm really trying to wiggle or stay loose with my brush to make it feel as natural as possible. So I'm kind of skipping the tip of my paintbrush across the paper sometimes and letting it not form an exact straight line. This will also allow for me to add some more leaves and branches that look like they're in front of the tree, because there'll be a gap for me to place them in. One trick for when you're trying to stay loose and wiggly is you can actually hold your brush further away from the tip. So the closer to the tip of your brush you hold it, the more control you have. If you hold it further back on the handle, then you have less control and it can make it more loose and wiggly. Now that can be kind of scary to give up some control that way, but I promise it's worth it, especially in a fun, loose landscape. Now, I've started adding my red dots for leaves, but then I realized I wish I had some lighter red, foggy bits of leaves in the background. So I've watered down my red, and I'm going to do more blobs kind of in between and behind the trees to give more distance. So that way my darker red dots will look like they're more in the foreground, and these blobs of reddish brown can be further away. And while I've got that color on my brush, I'm going to put a little bit in the reflection as well. So each time I do a little bit of layer up top, I'm trying to reflect it in the water below, not making it super dark or high contrast, but just faded suggestion of the colors that are there. Now I can go back and add more of those brighter red dots and clumps of leaves. Hopefully my reddish light blobs have dried. Otherwise, I want to make sure those do dry so that my dark red does not blend into the background blobs that I created. I want to build up layers from back to front that are all wet on dry now that I'm creating individual shapes. Now before I finish this up, I'm going to put a little bit of my red leaves on the ground as well. Since it is fall, those leaves are probably going to be falling off the trees, so once my trees are nice and full, I'm going to use that same color and kind of put it in the lower area of the trees as well as on the ground and on top of the grass a little bit. Now since my grass is already green, that red might not be as bright on top of it, but it'll still suggest that those leaves have fallen to the ground. Now for final details, I'm going to add a few more bits of reflection, a few more clumps of red further away in the trees, all of those things just to make sure I have everything I want in my piece of art. Always look over at the end, squint your eyes, look for contrast, look for pieces that might be missing, and then you can move on from there. I'm going to dry this off, and then I've got one last thing I want to add. The last thing is just a few little birds with my pen. Easy peasy right in the middle. it just gives it kind of a subject or something to focus on. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I will see you next time. Happy painting. Stay creative.